Let's identify and address issues with employee experience and orchestrate that with a cross-team ownership. That's what we do with customer experience. We want to deliver segment and persona-based approaches for different employee segments. So the reason I did that psychographic and really demographic persona is that we can't treat everybody equally. We wouldn't treat our customers that way. So why are we treating our employees that way? We want to create this clear linkage to customer experience delivery, the brand consistency, and the business results that we know are there. So think about that triangle I just showed you. We need to understand what's happening in the employee experience because that is the foundation for what we do. So then it's also, as we do it in customer experience, putting this rigorous centralized project management with project management reporting and business impact modeling and even simulations against employee experience. Now, I'm going to take that stance back and say, I know that's a little bit different thinking, but that's exactly what the organizations that we're hearing about over the last few days are doing differently with their employee experience. They're not just asking employees to give discretionary effort, they're caring for the employee as a customer of the brand. Now, here's some things we're going to talk about, because if you really think about the employee experience, they're interdependent. Employee and customer experience don't happen in vacuums. They are integrated. We really think about this as being what I call ecosystem mapping. And that's taking into account not only the customer experience, but also the employee experience and all the systems and processes, everything that supports the employee that's there and how they're able to accomplish their work in order to deliver a great experience. This is what I mean by employee experience. Not just understanding them, but also all the things that they need in order to create a better experience. In your toolkit I'm going to send to you, there's a maturity model around what employees need from an information, a structure, a technology standpoint in order to deliver great experiences. And it'll give you a good idea of ways to think about all the things that impact that experience. So what leads to positive employee experiences? So thinking about the positive employee experience, what we think about this easy, effective, and emotion about what we want customers to feel. The mirror image of that is a positive employee experience. Employees can get their work done. The employers believe the organization helps focus on the most important work. And employees feel connected to their work colleagues, customers, and purpose. So we match these two things up because we know they are so interdependent. As a matter of fact, if we think about how interdependent they are, we think about the employee experience and what they're saying to themselves, right? Put yourself in my shoes, value me over process, communicate with me like a friend, solve the problem I bring to you, address my needs first and yours second. We also have to think about employee experience. What employees would say to us. Recognize me when I do right. Don't burden me with unnecessary things. Measure how we are doing and share it. If you make me do it, show me why. So thinking about what really is in the head of our customers and employees and how we're going to understand those and marry those up so that when we think about ease and effective and emotion, we're caring for that across both the customer and the employee experience because they are so interdependent. So let's think about what do great brands do that are experience-led? What do they do differently? So you've heard a lot of great examples over the last couple of days about those experiences. And what I want you to really think about is these companies, our culture places the experience, both the customer and employee, at the center of their strategy and their processes. Okay, that's one. Two, they think about personal and professional growth of their employees. They're giving, they're thinking about what that employee needs coming in as a customer of the brand and building that just like they're building customer experiences. They're basing their decisions around employee insights and aligning around the values they've created as an organization. So employees can tell you whether they feel like the organization is living up to their values that they put in place. And we all know organizations where we see these glitzy value statements and purpose statements, but when you really look at the organization internally, that's not what's happening. So how do we make sure we align those things? They have a prioritized portfolio of actions. So many times in an organization, when I go in to work on customer employee experience, what I find is, I ask, what are you doing to improve the experience for customers and employees? And they say, we have a bunch of projects going on. And I'll ask what those are and who's managing them. And they'll say, well, we kind of push it out to the organization. We have a handful of things we're doing, as far as it relates to experience, but we don't really understand all the other things that are going on. Well, that's one of the things I would challenge you to do today, is to get a good grip on all of the things that are happening to change the experience for employees and for customers. Because if you don't know what's changing it, it's hard to manage it. And when we think about experience management, that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to manage. So let's get a prioritized portfolio of actions we're taking and make sure we're focused on the right things. These brands also design relative intentional experiences. So I'm going to talk a little bit about design thinking as a way to bring that to light and apply that to the employee experience. And they also have this kind of constant real-time measures of experience and the impact from an employee standpoint. So again, no longer the once a year or once a quarter employee survey. It's this ongoing real-time understanding and measure of what's happening. So what I'm going to tell you is, if you think about the skill sets that we have as customer experience professionals, I want you to think about having that same approach, all the tools, techniques, all the approaches, the way we do surveys, how we design, how we measure. And I want you to just take that lens and put it on the employee. Because what happens is nothing can stand alone. One of the things that I see happening is a lot of times the customer experience is being kind of glorified and we're doing great work in a brand, but the employees really feel left behind. So I want you to think about all the skills you have, flip that to the employee. And from this point on in the presentation, we're going to go to action. All right, that's great. I hear you. What do I need to go do? So I want you to think a little bit about designing your 2021 employee experience strategy, right? What's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? And I'm going to help you a little bit with starting to define that and give you some examples of what you can go do to really understand current experience and how you design your 2021 strategy. Okay, here's to action, right? So to create an experience, don't think about what you want to get from employees. Think about what you want to give them so they can achieve their goals. So organizations that focus on influencing certain behaviors are outcome driven. They also create a meaningful, memorable, and differentiated experience for the employee. It's a signature experience for the employee, which translates to the customer. And they deliver it in a way that builds a strong emotional bond with employees. They're empathetically delivered. So I want you to think about these three things being a component of your brand and your strategy. If the end of your brand, if you look at your strategy you're going to create, I want you to bounce it back against this outcome, signature, empathetically delivered experience. Okay, so I'm going to set a little bar for you to say, when you create your strategy, I want these to be kind of your guiding principles. I want you to think about the employee experience as focusing on what customers want to work versus what they need to work. So this goal is to create a human-centered experience with the latest technologies that is personalized, compelling, and memorable. So you can totally steal that and use that goal statement as what you're trying to do, that this is what I'm trying to deliver to employees. So we think about the employee experience having these three things: the culture, about how they're really feeling about the organization, this vibe that they get, how it's structured, leadership, compensation, all those things we typically think about with culture. It's also about this physical environment, anything that can be seen, heard, touched, or even tasted. Chairs, there are the meals that you provide, all of those kind of physical environment, which we all know has changed a lot in the last few years. And then this whole technology. So we see a lot of digitization happening with employees, but I want you to think about something. Digital shouldn't apply to everything. We as human beings, even in this, and especially in this COVID age, when we don't have the ability to really connect with people and have conversations, leaves a big gap. So while we think about digital really being a great tool, we don't really want to apply it to anything. So in your strategy, I want you to really think about where there needs to be this human connection versus what we can digitize in all aspects of the work. When you define this, when you start your strategy, I want you to really think about defining what these are. So whenever I talk about employee experience, I really have a hard time convincing people that employee experience isn't about asking for that discretionary effort, right, from employees to deliver a better experience. I talk about it being the sum of all the perceptions employees have about the interactions with the organization in which they work. And it's the totality of those experiences that encompass everything and their perceptions as well as their behavior. So it's no different from a customer experience, right? We think about all the things that impact an experience of a customer. Every touch point, it's no different with an employee. Think about your onboarding experience. Think about your performance reviews. Think about the day-to-day work employees do. All of those things contribute to the way we feel about an organization. And at the top, the employee engagement that we know that we're able to create by creating great employee experiences. We can really drive this employee engagement. And again, not to just deliver a better experience to customers, but also engage them so they're giving their best every day. They're committed to the organization's goals and they're motivated to contribute to that success and with an enhanced sense of their own well-being. So in your strategy, really define what you want and what you're trying to accomplish. Now, we all have these strategies, but I love sometimes when they get boiled down to really thinking about a one-page summary of those experiences. And one of the world's largest builders, I'll give you an example of what they did. They applied their experience strategy to both employees and customers, as well as their suppliers and partners. That really informed what they were doing and how they wanted employees to feel, and how they wanted customers, what principles they were going to define. Now, they define customer as anybody who interacts with the brand. So when you see customer or employee, they use them very interchangeably because they want it to apply to everyone. If you think about your experience roadmap and you were to really code switch, in other words, change everything that says customer to experience, you would have a roadmap that would allow you to begin to also shift all of these great skills that we have onto employees. And as I said, work side by side with your HR team and everyone else in the organization to really create great experiences. I'd also challenge you to think about what success looks like. This is one of the exercises in the book, workbook I'm going to send to you, this victory circle. And what I want you to take just a few seconds here to think about is if you think about what you're trying to do and what you really want your strategy to be, what does victory look like for you? A year from now, how do you want employees to think about the brand, think about what they're doing? How do you want them to feel about the brand? How do you want them to feel about their work? And how do you want that to come to life? So it is in state that you're trying to create. A victory circle is simply putting all of those in a big circle, simply putting those visionary statements that say, I want employees to feel valued. I want them to be able to contribute ideas any point in time throughout the day, anytime they have an idea about improving our brand or improving products or improving services. So this begins to help you establish what does good look like? Where are we trying to get to? And with that in hand, you can then create, all right, what are the steps I need to take to get there? The next thing that I'd like for you to think about is you've been hearing a lot in the sessions over the last couple of days about experience design, which is really at the center of change. So if we think about experience design, where does it start? Well, it starts with needs. And what we're really trying to understand from employees is what are the needs that they have from the brand in order to deliver their work, but also what they need from the brand from an emotional standpoint. And that's exactly what we do at design thinking. It's understanding needs and expectations, the emotional component of how they interact with the brand. Why wouldn't we apply that toward employees as well? So experience design is the center of change. Because if we think about experience design, it's really based on human needs. For our customers, we go and we understand, we sense the intent and the needs of customers. We know people, we go observe them, we get all this great data and information about what they're doing. We develop a new point of view, we frame those insights, and then we explore the concepts and ideate around what are the things that we can do to best meet those needs. We then frame solutions and test them, and then we launch them, and then we realize the offerings and benefits that come out of it. So I'd like for you to think about it. Again, we're going to flip the lens a little bit here and think about do we do this with our employees? Are we really intentional about understanding their needs? Do we really know what they do day in and day out and where they run into obstacles? Can we develop and design that experience just like we design customer experiences? So I want you to think about design being applied to also the experience that employees have with the brand. Now, the great thing about design thinking is also, in this day and age, of course, it's a little more difficult, but in organizations where I've done this before, we make the experience design with the employees being engaged to help co-create it themselves. We make it very experiential. We do, like stats here show 90% of what's learned is being remembered when they're doing. So we involve and engage employees to create their own experiences as well as customer experiences. So engage them, make it playful, be iterative, and be collaborative. You know, we're very social beings, so we like to collaborate online and offline, and those results are way more powerful. One of the other things in the toolkit that you get is access to some ideas about how to do online virtual collaboration, because that, in today's age when we can't get people together, it's important to have a platform to go do that. I also want you to think about the design tools and techniques that you have in your toolkit. I'd like for you to think about, as I go through this next section of how you're going to do it, I want you to think about creating empathy mapping and doing some ethnographic research. Go sit with an employee who's doing work and observe. Have conversations with them about everything that they're doing. Developing that point of view. This is journey mapping. Thinking about ideating, future state storyboarding, rapid prototyping, creating a learning lab. Think about your design tools and which ones you can use when it comes to understanding the experience, but also designing those new employee experiences. All right, so what are the opportunities? Let's really talk about applying that lens. So let's get into the how can I go do this? We're talking about applying the CX lens to employee experience. So thinking about all these things in your strategy that you want to make sure you include. What's my strategy and what's the outcome? What am I trying to get to? That's where your victory circle comes in. What intelligence do I need? Where am I co-creating with employees? How am I going to use design? What are the measures and metrics? How can I prove business value of engaging employees? And you see here that I've got a picture of the Apple employees, and they're in a learning environment for new associates. And the way that they approach employee experience is really critical. They're focused on all of these things and how they do it. And there's some great case studies about Apple and many other companies who are doing this, and you can get some great examples there. I want you to think about mapping and connecting this employee and customer journey. So think about your own customer experience mapping. Have you included a swim lane for employees? Because when you think about an employee trying to deliver that experience, how does that experience impact the customer? We can imagine if you've ever called customer care and you get a customer care rep who's very cranky and has had a really bad day or seems super frustrated, that really impacts our experience when we call it. So what's the employee experience and how does it impact customer? What hurdles do employees face when trying to serve the customer? There's, sometimes in care centers particularly, there's lots of applications they have to open to serve that customer. And that's a hurdle that they need to be help in overcoming. What do employees experience and feel when they're trying to complete a task? So if you think about what they do day in and day out, how do they feel about that task? And is that task necessary? Or are there ways to improve and make it easier for them to do that? What are the gaps between departments? When we think about the employee experience and the back end or offstage experiences that are happening, are there gaps between departments when it comes to employees being able to get their job done? Not just the customer, but the employee. What are the opportunities to make processes more efficient, pleasurable, and profitable? We often don't look at workflows and how our processes might be creating issues for employees. What's the impact of engagement based on the experiences, and how can we use digital and technology to make that better? So start with these questions. Start by asking, what is the employee experience like, and how can I really look at where we are? If questions about the experience management can address is, are there specific employee needs at different stages we can deliver on? What are the capabilities our organization needs to deliver a better experience for the employee? What do we need to improve the experience? What business goals can we look at? And what are the transitions between stages? So the next thing I want you to think about is, all right, that's great. I get it. I get it, Diane. What do we need to do differently? So I want you to think about mapping the employee experience. This is really the first thing that we do sometimes, other than doing the research and really understanding from employees what their experience is all about, gathering that information, really thinking about what is the experience, what would they tell us, just like customers, what would they tell us is happening? And so when we think about, we can map the employee journey, we can look at the root cause of issues. We can care for multiple channels. You know, employees are interacting with us, you know, in person on Zoom calls, for example. They're interacting with systems. They're doing a lot of things online. They've got multiple channels too. It's really about an integrated approach to these enterprise projects. How can we look at the employee experience and map that out to really understand the impact to customer experience, but also just them as employees, as a customer of the brand. It creates a different way to think about designing them. It's more holistic. When we think about employee journey mapping, it's not about that one single interaction the employee has, but really more holistic design, and it brings that employee more into focus. So no different again than customer experience. We're looking at the employee map. So I'm giving you a little bit of an outline here of just some high-level stages and steps that are included in employee journey. So when you think about beginning to do an employee journey map, you can think about recruiting, you know, how you're sourcing, what's the interview process like, what's pre-boarding like. On the onboarding, how do they go through orientation? What's our initial training experience like? How are comps and benefits set up, and how do we communicate that? What's technology like? I'll never forget a story at one company that I went to work for, and I didn't have a computer for the first week of my onboarding. There was really limited training. They gave me a buddy who would spend, you know, about 10 or 15 minutes in the morning kind of telling me what I was going to do during that day. And it didn't give me this comprehensive view, and I wasn't enabled. So it was a very poor experience, even onboarding, which, to be honest, clouded my entire view of the brand that I was working for. How about job execution? You know, that day-to-day things we do every day. Where are some of the opportunities? And this is everything from how you get the job done to rewards and recognition. And then we call this like performance management. And then we talk about like career development. So thinking about those steps and stages, what I want you to do is now take a look at, all right, I can go map that experience and really see where there's opportunities. So here's an example from my good friend, Greg Tucker, who did an employee experience journey map. And what you see here, as we kind of walk through it is, up here at the top, you see the experiences: recruiting, onboarding, doing my job, performance, and career management. And what he did was really brilliant in really laying out not only what was happening, but what are the triggers and what are the enablers, and how do employees really see that? You know, where do they have really negative experiences, like training and coaching and goal setting they found were just not great. But also some positive things, like there were clear goals established and they felt like managers supported them. And then what are the things that we need to care for? If we think about the enablers and the barriers, those are the things we want to tackle. So again, we're looking at this employee experience the same way we'd look at customer experience, bringing the data to life and really understanding what's happening. And then of course at the bottom, we have these moments of truth, looking at where there's highs and lows in the experience and where we have pain points that we need to go cure for. So think about that as being really the output. Now you understand the whole entity of employee experience, and you're able to go and address things just like we do in customer experience. So why is this important? So great, we've done the mapping, we think about the things we're going to go fix. It's kind of moving on the lines of now we got to create the new experience and really design that, we launch it, we manage the performance. What I want you to think about when we think about going to your leadership and talking about this and bringing your HR teams along and partnering with them is this employee experience and the ability to engage them really can drive business results. I want you to think about the ability to acquire new talent, to make employees more productive, to really get this customer experience piece, right? We know, everybody nods their head when we say, happy employees make happy customers. There is growth and profitability behind that. It's proven science. It also helps with innovation, some of these intangibles, right? Innovation, getting great ideas from employees, and this culture and the emotional state that creates that brand. I mean, we all know, like Southwest Airlines has been talked about the last couple of days, right? That you see when you think of Southwest employees, you think about, happy employees. And that really creates this bigger brand perception. So the employee experience improvements have both tangible and intangible value. And some of the employee experience examples I have over here that are tangible, dollar related, are listed on the right-hand side. Just a few examples. So this isn't just about really this creating a better experience for employees. It's about business performance. A couple of other things that I'm going to share with you, and if you want a few of the slides out of here, this is what I would include, or a couple more examples from Greg, a little digging in. Remember at the beginning I talked about this combination and connection between customer journeys and employee journeys, and there's a linkage. We start with this customer employee map, and we look at these role-based links to CX stages that really shape how we're going to look at employees. So start with your customer journey, but very quickly you begin to see if you map out the roles and who impacts the experience, both on stage, like a salesperson, and off stage, somebody who's writing a script for a call center, or somebody who's designing the system that supports the sales team. Everybody has a role in creating experience for that customer. And so if you look at that and you look at those roles, now we can go and understand, okay, if that's what's happening in the customer experience, what are the employee experience journeys and how are we enabling them to deliver? So thinking about this overall customer experience alignment to what's happening in the organization. What roles are linked to each of the customer experience stages? How are we taking an end-to-end experience of, for in this example, the sales team? Like, they are typically upfront in the consideration and purchase, but what happens when they have a handoff to the product or to support? What happens when that goes? What's this end-to-end experience that role plays in the experience itself? They will also have this cross-employee improvement and specific job improvements that if we look at it and say, hey, the sales team is really struggling with this handoff to account management, which is impacting the customer experience, but also making unhappy employees, that's a problem. So we become very aware of how the employee experience and customer experience are linked. And so to convert that back into, if you think about this wheels in the cog, that all of the employee experience efforts we put forth, the training that we do, the employee onboarding, the engagement, talent management, all really help with implementing and executing on customer experience programs. Really, I'm thinking about experience management, how we bring customers together. And then these two things really come together to say, if we look at both customer and employee measures and metrics, like Net Promoter Score, service metrics, acquisition, employee productivity, from both a value standpoint as well as a metric standpoint, we're able to start talking about reducing cost to serve, reducing acquisition costs, increasing retention. And guess what? That's what your executives are thinking about. They're thinking about revenue, profit, cost, and all those things, which are all driven by how we understand, create, design, and optimize experiences for customers and employees. Okay, so now we've gone through what is it, why does it matter, how should I think about my strategy? So I want to share with you just a few examples in the time we have left of, all right, now I understand when I look at different brands that I really admire about their customer employee experience, what they've done differently. Well, this is the approach they take, all the things I've just talked about. So when we think about that and really shifting to this experience-led from an employee experience standpoint, we want to think about this culture piece. that leaders use co-creation, they communicate and reinforce through various methods what's happening, shaping those perceptions, behaviors, and understanding. They're really engaging employees because it's really about this shared value and behaviors as a result of that. So just like with customer experience, we're understanding what's being created, what are the values we want to propose, and then what behaviors are we looking for. So if we can have employees stay longer, if we can have them be more productive, they're going to in turn create those values we just talked about. Well, we like to think about Zappos all the time, right? So we think about customer service, but we also think about delivering happiness. But the internal culture of Zappos is where we really start to think about those core values and how employees, when they think about what they do every day, really create and make those values come to life. And that's what shows up not only for their employee experience and their ability to hire great people and keep them, but also how that impacts the customer experience. So we think about really their intentional design of experiences. Their Zappos Insights and their School of Wow is a way that they do employee onboarding and engagement. And they systematically design that. They're continually improving it. They continually measure the impact of the onboarding changes to the long-term engagement of employees as they do everything when it comes to how the employee experiences Zappos. So it's really about defining these new ways of working. I want you to think about this as being another part of the change that you want your organization to go through. And when you think about this change, it's really, disruption, agility, and collaboration. We really need to think about leading disruption, and the companies that are doing well now are really considering their employees as that biggest asset and considering employee experience foundational to creating great customer experiences. Because if we think about this culture of trust that they're creating at great brands, it's all about it starts with the employee and the employees feeling the way they do about the brand, which then creates the perception for customers. So we really need to think about this as an asset, the perception of employees as an asset, empowering and encourage them to really see the wider picture of how their work impacts the brand, how their voice is heard, and how they can really begin to think about not just customer first, but what do they need to enable in order to make that happen. And you want to really think about this is back to the whole point of nobody really owns the customer, but someone can always own the moment. I love this quote from Disney because this is where employee experience comes to life. Even customer experience professionals, all we're doing is helping to facilitate and creating ways that employees can really own the moment for not just external customers, but internal customers. But you got to bring them along too. You got to really help them see that there are the what, the how, and the why. So we really need to help our executives and employees understand that in order for us to deliver, we really want to help them understand how they are impacting not only the experiences with customers, but with each other, and increasing their confidence in what skills or abilities they need to improve experiences. So, share with you just a little bit about how we think about engagement and enablement. So if we're all about the employee experience, then we really need to make sure that people understand what they need to feel and how they're emotionally connected to the brand. That we need to help them understand why it's important and develop their skill sets and really think about this end-to-end journey approach we took, and then giving them the resources to do that. So what we're saying is we want them, if we're going to create different experiences internally and externally, we need to give them the information, the emotional why, and then the tools to be able to do that. And so that's really, if you think about the elements of your strategy, would be creating that kind of customer-centric culture, but really experience-led philosophy and culture, and thinking about all of these different components in your strategy that might contribute to that. So let me give you a few examples of that. Caterpillar creates what they call CAT moments. They have an understanding of not only the business relationship, but also how they then deliver that. How do they create a consistent experience internally and externally? And then how they deliver. They use predictive opportunity analysis for internal employees as well as external. They have proactive personalized support, again, for both employees and customers. Anytime, anywhere, any device, for employees that when they're either in the field like you see here, or they're sitting at their home doing work, that they have the right resources and access. It's also about creating and celebrating the actions that employees take for each other and for the customer, to get this daily brief of what people are doing differently to inspire them back to that emotional connection. Also thinking about, dedicating time and effort to not just doing something good for a customer, but doing something good for each other. And John Deere also has a customer champion, but this is also mirrored by an experienced champion group that cares for the employee experience as part of that customer, being a customer. So they consider, again, the customer is anybody who is it interrelates with the brand, and that's what employees are. We also have a Starbucks who really thinks about these values of how they treat each other, where they're creating a positive experience that is genuine, knowledgeable, considerate, and evolved, not just for the customer, but also the employee. And they're very specific about that. The principles that they use to turn ordinary experiences into extraordinary are principles of what they do for, again, not just the customer, but each other. And they drive innovation and co-creation. Their program called My Starbucks Idea is both customer and employee creating that new realm of where we are. So we're at an inflection point. There's some challenges moving forward, and I want you to think about how you will tackle these as you define your strategy for employee experience. Many companies have not yet made employee experience, excuse me, a priority for HR leaders. They often delegate it to this annual engagement survey. So I want you to step back and think a little bit about what is your organization doing around understanding the experience that employees are having. Second, a lot of companies have created a C-suite role of employee experience or experience officers, but they haven't really assigned a senior executive or team to design and deliver the experience. So in your strategy, thinking about, well, what's the role and who's responsible to really bring this to bear? If you don't have that structure, that's part of your strategy. Sometimes HR departments find it difficult to obtain the resources to address this larger picture. So they're so busy with some of the functional work of, performance evaluations and creating structure and regulatory compliance that they often don't have time. So it's important to also understand, well, where are we going to get the resources to focus on this larger picture? And what I always say to people is, think about the benefits you're going to create with a better employee experience. And that's where you're going to get resources and money to go back and do some of these things. So build it kind of from the ground up. Companies also need to update their tools to engage employees. At least, poll surveys, where you're getting information back from the employee. If we don't have the right tools in place to understand the employee experience, we're not going to be able to create those engaging experiences with the brand. And lastly, many companies are really focused on this point-in-time engagement, but they haven't really thought about performance management, goal setting, wellness, workplace design, and leadership into an integrated framework. So these are some things that just you need to consider are challenges, like we talked about at the very beginning, of what might be in your way to create a great employee experience. All right, so the benefits, as we wrap up and get to some discussion in the last 10 minutes, really thinking about the ability for you to be innovative and agile as an organization. It is dependent on your employees. Innovation comes from internal and external. And if your employees are engaged, they're more likely to contribute to innovation, and they're more likely to be able to move quicker, and if they have the right tools and motivation. It's also about differentiation. We know that brands that create great experiences for their employees, that bleeds over into the brand experience. So it creates this, why are they different when we think about our interactions with brands and employees? So your role is to be a Sherpa. It's to lead the organization in a way that helps them really understand this is the path forward. Our brand is dependent on our employees. They are, if you think about it, customers are your biggest asset that you're managing. Your customers are typically, your employees are typically the biggest cost of an organization. So if you're managing both the asset, the revenue, and the cost in the P&L components, that's where you can really bring that to bear. So in your strategy, I want you to also think about how you're going to impact the financials of your organization by changing experiences for your employees. This is a transformation, not a project. It's really about the human being and not just the process. But your brand depends on getting this employee experience right. And I hope today you've gotten some inspiration from not only an approach, but having a strategy and really looking at the benefits that can come from this employee experience. So I'll open it up for discussion. We've got just a few minutes left today. Again, if you send me your email or put it in chat, I'm happy to send you the toolkit where some of these concepts I talked about will kind of walk you through your strategy.
This is Sheikh Mansoor here. I just have a question. Just wanted to ask you. Firstly, it's a great session, very insightful, I would say. I just wanted to understand from your side, as you're saying about the employee engagement, how the employer and employee relation has to be maintained, etc. What other benefits an employer or what other incentivizations can an employer put across for an employee to get the loyalty? I would not say loyalty. Loyalty may be a wrong word. Uh, to get the maximum output from the employee, if I may ask.
Oh, right. So I think when you think about, your own role with your organization, or maybe you own your own organization, what we typically think about is, I'll give an example of this. Like, um, at one organization I worked for, it took me about 20 minutes every time I wanted to reserve a conference room, simply because the systems didn't work very well, and there was lots of confusion when people would reserve a room, and it would automatically kick you out if you didn't confirm the room 15 minutes before the meeting. Just really things that were just irritating, right? That created, for me, one, it was productivity issue. Two, it was just a frustration. So that emotional feeling that you have when you know you have to go book a room, that angst and frustration, we start to attach that to the brand. And that's where it starts to come in to say, in the whole scheme of things, is it really worth, what I feel when I go to work every day, worth me doing that? And if I make a decision about, should I stay or leave, it's all of those experiences that are going to create, my decision about whether I'm going to stay, or if I want to get promoted, or if I want, to progress with that organization. And that's where you get that impact of the experience. So at any point in time, much like customer experience, we can look at the interaction, the resulting emotion, how that emotion drives behavior, and how that behavior drives business results. That's kind of the cascade of things that I talk about. Everything you do drives emotions for employees, which drives their behavior and decisions they make, which impacts your business both from a customer standpoint as well as the financial aspect of, their productivity, their retention, their ability to get things done, and effort that they put forth. Does that help?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for.
Awesome. Yeah.